Alright guys, it's Chris Miasma coming at you again with another Buddy Fight deck profile. Today we have my Ancient World deck with my buddy Bean, Dragon Kid Richie. Yep, this is the Raging Spirits deck, or as I've heard a few people call it in tournaments, particularly at last year's regional competition, the Raging Asshole deck, which it kind of is. Let's get started on this. As you can see, Dragon Kid Richie is my buddy. He has the ability to nullify the lifelink of any size 3 monster on my field, or any lifelink. Nope. Size 3 Raging Spirits only. My bad. Alright, so let's get started. My size zeros are 4 Dragon Kid Richie. I'm actually waiting to get in my boxes of Assault on the Omnilords, so keep an eye out for my unboxing video. I'm hoping to pull his other version, Underling of the Fire Lord Ricky, which works out so well with Burn Nova. It's great. Next up we have our size 1s. A lot of people debate on this one with me, but I've sometimes found it useful. I'm going to tech it out once I get the new stuff in, to make room for other stuff. But I have 4 Demonic Fairy Dragon Sorcery. Whenever he destroys a card, for once that turn he gains double attack, which is not terrible, but with a power of 4,000 there's not a lot he's really bumping off the field. So he's good for pegging off small stuff, or getting, an attack on your opponent. But he's pretty much going to come out of the deck soon, so that's not a problem. Size 2s. I just like it because I like to have lots of life gain in Ancient World. I have Rage Thirst Emperor Grand Wilderness, because every time he takes and destroy is a monster, I can gain 2 life, which is great for the deck considering all the life gain it already has. But moving on to our size 3s. Size 3s are pretty much the key point in this deck. It's what makes or breaks it at the end of the day. I have 3 Soul Path Dragon Emperor Oni Street. I think it's Oni Street. The good thing to know about size 3 Raging Spirits is that they all have the ability to switch the attack target to themselves. So if you have things like Richie on the field, it can avoid being destroyed purely by just changing the attack target to a different size 3. Next up I have Bash Dragon Emperor Champion Lord. One of my personal favorites just because he has double attack. And 6k defense in any deck is kind of beautiful. Lifelink is kind of a moot point as long as you have Richie on the field and some way to protect him. Next up we have Wicked Dragon Emperor Billion Knuckle. One of my personal favorites. For 2 gauge and the top card of your deck into his soul. Well, he has Soul Guard and Counterattack. He's by far one of the easiest cards to take and, launch counterattacks and defend. And then finally, my personal favorite of the deck. The one that if you don't run it in the deck, you really should be. I run 3 Ethereal Overlord Gang the King. For 3 gauge, you can call him to the field. He has Penetrate. And if you have 3 or more Raging Spirits in the drop zone, he gains 6,000 attack power continuously. So there's tons of combos you can do with that. And looking at some of the newer stuff, maybe I could make him a bigger deal. But as of right now, it's not fully necessary. Because a Penetrate of 5, especially if you open game him with 5 damage, you kind of set the game in your advantage, which is not a bad deal. It's personally one of the things I try to do. I'm debatably thinking when I edit the deck, I'm going to throw a 4th one of that in, as well as look at some of the other newer support to see what I can use. And as I said before, the deck's main purpose is kind of life gain. So we have 3 Dragon Emperor Legend, which will let me gain a gauge, draw a card, and gain a life. Which is great. You can only cast 1 per turn, but with the extra life gain you're getting, plus the extra gauge, it helps fuel the deck for later. Next up, I have 2 Dragoverse. You pay 1 gauge to set it, and anytime a card with lifelink enters your field, you gain a life. Next up, I have Dragon Acadia, which at the beginning of each of my main phases, I can take and gain a life. As I said, this deck does a lot of life gain. The highest life value I've managed to get so far has been 34. So it hasn't been, insanely high like I've heard some people who occasionally get into the 50s sometimes. But you'd really have to drag out the game to really do that. Next up, I have 3 Dragon Dreams. Basically, just cast it and gain 3 life. I've got 4 Gathering of the Armed Dragon. It's the Raging Spirit counterattack card. Gives them 3,000 attack, 3,000 defense, and counterattack. I don't find much of a use for it, so I'm thinking of replacing it with the new shield card they have coming out in the new set, which is Manliness Spirit Shield. Since like a lot of the newer shield cards, it doesn't rely on there being a monster in the center, I see it would be a very good option, considering it nullifies the attack, versus something like Black Dragon Shield, which we haven't seen really happen again, which just lowers any damage you would take to 0 and bumps you a life. Next up we have Dragon Prudent. Their Nullify card, as long as you don't have a monster in your center. And finally, just because it's Ancient World, Rise and Fall of Dragon. You cast it in response to any card that gets cast, be it you or your opponent's. Pay 2 life and gain 4 gauge. So it all works out at the end for gauge ramping. Now we come to, this is debatably one of my least favorite parts of the deck, the weapon. Because it's not very usable unless you're just already beating your opponent down so bad the low power doesn't bother you. But it is Sky Splitting Armor Masmaro. 3,000 power and 2 crit. Personally, I don't like it. I don't enjoy it. I'm waiting for the new one to come out when I get my boxes, which is Scatter Armor Enma, which you would pay 2 gauge for. And if this card is not involved in a link attack, it cannot be nullified. And it can even attack, when there's a size 3 in the center, which is awesome. And finally we have my Impact. Now a lot of people, namely I'm guessing it's newer players that get on me for this at my locals, or they're not familiar with some of the older stuff. Considering that they don't know that Ancient World is heavy reliant on size 3s. I like to run Evil Crusher Steel Dragon Barrage. For 3 gauge and having a size 3 monster on your field, you can deal out 4 points of damage. Unlike Gargantua Punisher and some other impacts, it's not conditional as to when you can cast it. You can cast it at any given time, which is awesome. So if you had enough to actually open with it, in addition to Gang the King, you could use both, which would make for a pretty nasty combo, dealing out 9 points of damage in 1 turn. But that's it for my Raging Spirits deck. I hope you guys liked it. Definitely comment down below and let me know what you think, or any opinions you may or may not have on your own build, or questions. But as always, like, subscribe, and keep on watching, and we'll see you later.